sitting Vice President Chilima ran against President Peter Mutharika after the pair fell out. Chilima, of course, defied, the call to resign and formed his own political party, that the UTM, which now came third. And but Mutharika, yeah.
All right. You know what? We're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately, but always grateful for your insights happening in the region. Dennis, thanks so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you so much, Peter Ndoro.
Thank you. That's Dennis Beru, journalist and team leader at Grassroots Journalism in Kenya, giving us a heads up on what's been happening in East Africa. It's 6:30. It's time for your news headlines. Here's Dwalane Tulongwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines, the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria, South Africa, will later this week hand down judgment in the Zambian government's main application to challenge the final resting place of the late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu. The BBC says its Africa Eye investigation has revealed how women known as madams have involved children as young as 13 in prostitution in Kenya. And finally, officials in Haiti say 9 people, including a 3-year-old child, have been kidnapped from an orphanage which cares for more than 240 children, some with disabilities. I will have details on these and other stories at 7 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
And now let's say good morning to Fikile Lingwati for our first full sports bulletin for this Tuesday on Rise and Shine.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning, guys. We begin with the cricket news. India have pulled off their narrowest ever win in Test cricket to share the 5-match series with England 2-2. They beat their hosts by 6 runs on the 5th morning of the 5th and the final Test match at the Oval in London. England resumed on 339 for the loss of 6 wickets, requiring just 35 more runs for victory and a 3-1 series win. But player of the match, Mohammad Siraj, took 2 wickets inside the first 20 minutes. England were eventually bowled out for 367 in the 86th over of their second innings to hand India victory. Some more cricket news. South Africa's Proteas left-arm spinner Keshav Maharaj says he intends to play international cricket until he's 40. Maharaj was named Cricket SA's Men's Player of the Season last week and has no intentions of stopping anytime soon. Now 35-year-old, he's been an integral part of the team setup for years and says the only thing that will change his mind is if he loses the appetite for the game in the coming years.
I always said I'd like to get to 40 in international cricket, but it just depends on how the body goes and how I wake up the next day. If I ever lose the passion to bowl, I have to walk away and be honored to the game. But from a team perspective, obviously having a taste of success, hopefully it unlocks many doors. But I think this is a wonderful opportunity for the team to sort of look back on the things that we did well, but also try and find ways in which we can evolve, because obviously people know the brand and style we're going to play and want to catch us. So hopefully we can be the leaders in the pack and really set the foundation when we do start the season, for this next cycle.
On to football news. The Confederation of African Football, CAF 47th Ordinary General Assembly will be held in Kinshasa, the Democratic Republic of Congo, on the 6th of October. The Ordinary General Assembly will bring together leading figures in African football, including the presidents of CAF's 54 member associations, representatives from the 6 zonal unions, and senior football officials from across the continent. CAF President Dr. Patrice Motsepe will chair the 47th Ordinary General Assembly. And the Soweto 4-time marathon winner Yvette Van Zyl is bracing for the worst as uncertainty continues to loom over this year's race due to a leadership standoff. The Soweto Marathon Trust and the newly established non-profit organization group are locked in a power struggle over the event's hosting rights. Van Zyl, who is eager to compete, says she's working on a contingency plan in case the marathon is called off.
Well, it's not looking good, the news that I see about Soweto. So it's debatable 50-50 if it's going on. So I'm making different plans. But if Soweto happens, I will definitely be there. Unfortunately, last year I had to miss it. I had to talk on the TV and not run. So that was really hard. Yeah, if Soweto happens, I will really be gunning for it.
For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fide Lungwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa in business on Channel Africa.
The United States was very vocal at the beginning of South Africa's G20 presidency, and this is largely due to strained relations with South Africa at the time, that they were not really keen on participating. Where do they stand right now?
The US is planning to take over the presidency of the G20 next year, and our understanding from them is that they intend to continue to do so, and therefore it is quite difficult then to be in a situation where you are not attending deputies' meetings or discussions during our presidency and then to take over the presidency next year. From a finance track perspective, there has been engagement. We've been working on a communique last week and this week here in Zimbabwe. What's important about that is that it's a consensus document. And so all the members in the room have to agree to the language that is used there. And our US colleagues have been part of those discussions and negotiations.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
6:36 Central Africa time. It's time to take a first look at what's been happening in the world of business as we say good morning to Tabiso Lehuko.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
A very good morning. Nigeria's oil production surpassed 1.8 million barrels per day last month, with the current average output at 1.78 million barrels per day. The West African country, Africa's largest oil producer, relies on crude oil for nearly two-thirds of government revenue and over 80% of foreign currency earnings, making production gains critical for stabilizing its economy. But widespread oil theft, unrest, and years of underinvestment curtailed output and strained public finances before Nigeria stepped up a crackdown in the oil-rich Niger Delta region. South Africa's gold fields expect half-year profit to rise by as much as 236% on the back of higher gold production and record-high bullion prices. In a trading update, Gold Fields says its headline earnings per share would be between $1.9 and $1.21 in the 6 months to the 30th of June, compared with the $0.36 during the same period last year. Chandugo Ligege reports.
Strong investment demand reflecting U.S. growth and tariff-related inflation concerns, as well as central bank buying and resilient jewelry demand, are expected to drive bullion prices higher. Goldfields says its gold production rose 24% in the first half to 1.136 million ounces from 918,000 ounces previously.
Congress of South African Trade Unions COSATU Parliamentary Coordinator Matthew Parks says the country cannot afford further job cuts that are likely because of the 30% tariffs imposed by the US. The tariffs are expected to come into effect this Thursday. He says International Relations and Cooperation Minister Ronald Lamola and Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition Pax Dau must come up with a plan and find a lasting solution. Park says that this is a crisis that needs urgent intervention.
For us, this is a crisis. It needs to be fixed. Number one is for government at the highest levels, be it the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, be it the Minister for Trade Industry and the Minister for Development, Ronald Lamola and Parks Tau, to intervene. Continuous work to put in place a new trade agreement with the US. They have made many good proposals. We need to flesh this out.
The European Union will suspend its 2 packages of countermeasures to US tariffs for 6 months, following a deal with the US President Donald Trump. The EU-US agreement leaves many questions open, including tariff rates on spirits, and Trump's executive order last week setting tariffs on most EU goods at 15% did not include crave-outs such as for cars and car parts. EU officials have said they expect more executive orders to follow soon. Spotify says it will increase the monthly price of its premium individual subscription in selection markets from September, as the Swedish streaming giant looks to improve margins. The subscription price will rise to $13.86 per month from $12.73 in markets including South Asia, the Middle East, Africa, Europe, Latin America and the Asia-Pacific region. The company said the subscribers will receive an email explaining the price increase over the next month. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,531 naira. In Botswana, it's at 13.41. Kenya, 128 shilling 521. And in Zambia, it's at 22 kwacha 86. The BRICS countries and Brazil's dollar there will cost you 5.54. Russia, 79 rubles 87. India, 87 rupees 18. China, 71.19. And in South Africa, the dollar will cost you 18 rand 4 cents. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Commodities markets, gold is trading at $3,362 and platinum at $1,310 per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $68.35 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Thabisolo Hoko.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
Our G20 fact for this Tuesday: South Africa has proposed the establishment of a cost of capital commission during its G20 presidency. This commission will deliver a comprehensive expert review on the issues impacting the cost of capital for developing economies, which could help address future debt sustainability issues and the related fiscal space challenges. And that's our G20 fact for this morning.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
The South African Broadcasting Corporation, SABC Sport, brings you Chasing the Sun. And this is a powerful 5-part documentary series about South Africa's national rugby team, the Springboks. And it tells the rousing tale of their path to redemption and ultimate World Cup glory in 2019. It started on the 13th of July at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC2, and you can still tune in every Sunday for the highs and the heartaches and the heroics that made rugby history. You can stream each chapter of this tale on SABC Plus anytime, anywhere, and guess what? No subscription is required. Don't miss Chasing the Sun this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC2 or on SABC Plus. Be there when history shines.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa. Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
South Africa's liquor traders' economic impact continues to grow, creating employment in a rapidly evolving market. This was revealed at an event celebrating contributors to South Africa's beer value chain, the local retailers, hosted in Johannesburg. The event sought to highlight the industry's significant role in advancing the nation's economic development and support for livelihoods. Nhlanhla Mahlangu has more.
The event, hosted by South African breweries, heard that liquor traders remain key economic drivers, supporting businesses, creating opportunities, and keep communities thriving. Griselda Venter, Chief Director for Economic Development in Gauteng, says liquor traders are the cornerstone of economic growth that fuels job creation and drives tourism. She says they contribute to the economy, support township and rural development, thus driving economic inclusion.
Liquor traders act as anchors in the township economy. They help to stimulate the demand across multiple industries as well. Additionally to this, supplier liquor side businesses often stimulate small-scale infrastructure development.
Jaco Pereira, Vice President for Sales at South African Breweries, says the local retailers industry has the potential to shape the economic landscape of South Africa.
I think our country has got a lot of opportunities for us, for the long run, for all of us. We, thriving, the spirit of collaboration and shared prosperity prevails.
37 tavern owners from across the country received a certificate of recognition and a glass trophy. One of the recipients is Halelisa CBC from KwaZulu-Natal province. He says he's grateful for the recognition.
So this recognition is very big for us because we are finally being recognized as business people, as professional business people. Some of us have faced difficulties in our businesses, but still we felt as if maybe if SAB can intrude us more, maybe teach us more. So SAB is coming along with us and we are very glad. That shows that we have now entered the big space.
Masla Pillay from Dundee, also in KwaZulu-Natal, says the recognition will help grow his business.
It means a lot, because that helps in the growth of the business, which we then pass on to our clients. The more incentives we can get from SAB, that we pass on to our customers. And therefore, by doing that, we acquire more business, from the clientele. We draw clients like that, with specials, the offers they give us, that we give it and pass it on to our clients.
The event sought to raise awareness of the industry's value chain and its overall impact and encourage dialogue and collaboration among stakeholders, industry peers, and government regulators. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Nhlanhla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
Zambia's Attorney General, Mulilo Kabesha, says that he's satisfied with how South Africa's High Court, sitting in Pretoria, handled the hearing in the burial dispute of the late former President Edgar Lungu. The case, which was heard on Monday, saw both sides given a fair opportunity to present their arguments. Kabesha praised the court's conduct and confirmed that government lawyers had attempted to negotiate with the Lungu family before the matter reached the courtroom. A ruling is expected on Friday. Channel Africa's Michael Mbewe picks up the story for us.
Court 4E of the North Gauteng High Court, sitting in South Africa's capital, Pretoria, was packed to capacity on Monday as arguments in the ongoing dispute between the Zambian government and the family of the late president, Edgar Lungu, regarding his burial arrangements were being contested. Following the proceedings, Zambia's Attorney General Mulilo Kabesha expressed his satisfaction with how the case was handled. Speaking to Channel Africa, Kabesha described the court as calm and patient, allowing both parties ample time to present their arguments without interruption.
I'm very, very, very happy. Yeah, I'm very satisfied with how the matter proceeded. Both parties argued the matter, and the court was very calm and the court gave each side the time they needed to. None of the parties was cut in terms of stopping, but court was just asking for clarifications. The court was very patient to hear the parties, and I think it's good. We, on our side, we are happy the way the matter proceeded.
He says in his wisdom he saw it fit to halt Lungu's burial in South Africa at the 11th hour for the interest of Zambians following Lungu's family decision.
The family had said the remains of the former president will not be repatriated and that the former president will be buried in South Africa. And as you are indicating, there was a church service ready for burial. But the Zambians, the interest of the Zambians, the humble Zambians who loved the president, it means they were not going to enjoy, they were not going to pay their last respect. And that's in my wisdom.
Following that, numerous correspondences were exchanged between the parties to try and resolve the matter amicably, but due to non-alliance, it prompted the Zambian government to take a drastic measure.
27th June, our lawyers wrote to their lawyers to say we are available as government to continue with the discussions and come to an amicable position. 29, somewhere there, around 29th, the lawyers for the respondent, they wrote to our lawyers to say the first respondent had gone for a retreat, so they would come back, but they never came back. So the wisdom to stop or to suspend the burial was that parties still need to sit down and discuss.
Furthermore, Kabesh explained that the government had requested a temporary halt on the burial to enable further discussions with the family.
On behalf of the government, I thought we needed to stop temporarily the burial so that parties can discuss and be able to decide what should be done. And so what has happened now, we have come to court, and from the look of things, the court has indicated that judgment will be given on or before Friday.
Kabesha emphasized that under Zambian law, the rights and wishes of an individual's family, while important, do not override or take priority over the broader public interest.
The rights of the family cannot be supreme, cannot take precedent over the public interest. And that's a law we have in Zambia.
Reacting on behalf of the Lungus, Given Lubinda is the acting president of the Patriotic Front Party, which late Zambian President Edgar Lungu was leading.
On behalf of the party, we are happy that this case has been heard. We hope that this is the start of the close of this long-awaited journey. It is totally inhumane to keep the family in mourning for 60 long days. And we're hoping that the judges, as they look at this matter, will pay attention to the fact that the family had conceded to bury in Zambia, and that concession was broken when the government decided to go against the initial agreement. And that when they come and give judgment tomorrow, they will be doing it also with the spectacles of justice. That justice be done. For us, we are happy that at long last, this matter has been heard. And we just leave it now to the judges to determine what the next course of action will be. And it is our hope that the next course of action will be one that is in favor of the family.
In support of Lungu's family, evangelist Alex Masuka, a Zambian national who is in exile in South Africa for political persecution, had this view.
My viewpoint is I wouldn't favor that the judgment can actually enforce the burial in Zambia, in the sense that the First Lady, the children, they are all faced with criminal allegations, which the situation cannot be favorable, because even after the burial, definitely there will be some persecution of some kind. So I would love that they must have a peaceful burial here. It is not permanent. If times allow, we can repatriate the body back to Zambia.
Judgment has been reserved. Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
South Africa's Electricity and Energy Department will launch a legendary project aligned to the G20 Clean Cooking outcome to accelerate investment in clean cooking in Africa. The department's Energy Transition Working Group held its third technical meeting in Sun City and touched on the implementation of just energy transition programs, which include clean cooking. According to International Energy Agency, 4 in 5 families across the continent still cook with polluting fuels like wood, charcoal or dung, often over open fires or basic stoves. These practices contribute to more than 800,000 premature deaths each year due to household air pollution. SABC News reporter Tabang Morutlwa compiled this report.
Matsatseng village is only 30 kilometers from Mahikeng, the village that has been in existence for years. It still does not have electricity.
My name is Carolina. I stay in Matsatseng. We've been living here for many years. We don't have electricity. We rely on using fire outside or use a paraffin stove to cook.
Carolina Nebe says they survive by living like in the olden days, using open fire to cook.
Cooking over an open fire outside is not good for us. The smoke irritates and damages our eyes. The fumes also affect our lungs, especially because we also use wood to start the bonfire. The paraffin stove also has smoke that contributes to indoor pollution.
This has become a health hazard for her.
Yes, we grew up cooking on the bonfire, but we need better ways of cooking. We need government to help us with electricity. We can't grow up and die using these methods of cooking. I used to have a great eyesight, but now my eyes are always itching. I can't even see when I write.
Electricity and Energy Deputy Minister Samantha Graham Murray says this has also affected those who couldn't afford electricity.
What we're finding now is that with the cost of electricity going up, people are now having to make choices. Do I buy food? Do I buy electricity? So with that happening, they're now resorting to alternative methods of cooking. And that is creating, harmful environments for women particularly and for children. So within the continent of Africa, 500,000 women and children die prematurely every year as a result of the toxins that are released from the fuels that they are using to cook on. So we're trying to eliminate that throughout Africa. And in South Africa, we're trying to find alternatives to electricity so that we can find cheaper ways for people to actually be able to cook.
At the top of the department's G20 discussions, alternative ways for clean cooking, as Deputy Minister Samantha Graham Murray elaborates.
So that can be something like gas, and the gas companies are obviously on board with it. So there are a number of gas companies that we're hoping to work with. But it's also in finding biomass and alternative fuel sources that are not toxic, that address other things like, the environment. So we can use alien plants as an example, and that provide people with an opportunity to find alternative sources of cooking that don't cost them as much as electricity does.
The African Union's Rashid Abdallah, given the green light, emphasized the need to promote clean cooking in African countries as the current way of cooking affects the health of many.
1 billion of our African citizens depend mainly on traditional cooking method using charcoal and firewood. And actually, they have so many impact in terms of health. We have contribute to desertifications because every day we are cutting trees. Clean cooking, it is an issue for Africa because 80% of the people without access to clean cooking is African. From African Union perspective, we are encouraging a basket of fuel, being electrical cooking, LPG cooking, natural gas cooking, or even improved soft cooking.
It remains to be seen when South Africa will introduce biomass to enhance clean cooking. I'm Tabang Morutlwa in Mahikeng.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
Did you know that today Burkina Faso is celebrating its Independence Day? Yeah, in 1960, Burkina Faso gained its independence from France, and it looks like they gained even more independence from France in recent years. So it's a special day. Happy Independence Day to all our listeners in Burkina Faso. It's a special day for you today, and I wonder what you are doing on this Independence Day. Congratulations.
It's 7 o'clock Central African time. Good morning to you if you've just joined us. We now enter the second hour of Africa Rise and Shine on Channel Africa, where we bring you the African perspective. Broadcasting on our live streaming at Channel Africa 1 is the handle. That's on YouTube. And that's also across our various social media platforms, where we welcome you to send your questions or comments. We're also on www.channelafrica.co.za and the SABC Plus app. My name is Asanda Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. Now, we got quite a lot that we're looking at in this hour. We have election tensions taking place in a number of countries. Cameroon heads to the polls October the 12th. But things are happening in the run-up to those elections. We'll be crossing to our correspondent Morki Kinzeka in this hour to find out what's going on in there. And also in Ivory Coast, escalation there as well. 6 senior members of Opposition African People's Party arrested. Find out why after the news with Jwalane Tulongwebe and the headlines with sports headlines with Fikile Lingwati.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. The Gauteng High Court in Pretoria, South Africa, will later this week hand down judgment in the Zambian government's main application to challenge the final resting place of the late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu. The Lungu family want the former president to be buried in South Africa, while the Zambian government believes that he should be repatriated to the country and be buried in Embassy Park in the capital Lusaka. Following yesterday's court proceedings, Zambia's Attorney General Mulilo Kabesha says he's happy with how things unfolded.
I'm very, very, very happy. Yeah, I'm very satisfied with how the matter proceeded. Both parties argued the matter, and the court was very calm and the court gave each side the time they needed to. None of the parties was cut in terms of stopping, but court was just asking for clarifications.
The families and survivors of apartheid-era gross human rights violations in South Africa, together with the Foundation for Human Rights, say they strongly oppose the government's application tomorrow at the High Court in Pretoria to delay the constitutional damages case they have brought. The state will be requesting either postponement or stay of the main application pending the outcome of a Judicial Commission of Inquiry. Busi Bupela has the story.
The case filed by 25 families and survivors of apartheid-era crimes on the 20th of January 2025 seeks to have government's conduct in obstructing the investigation and/or prosecution of apartheid-era cases referred by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to the National Prosecuting Authority, declared unlawful and in violation of the applicant's human rights. They argue that the Commission of Inquiry, set up by the President in May, lacks the authority to adjudicate rights violations and may only make recommendations to the President, who is both a respondent in the court's proceedings and a key figure in the Commission itself.
The Department of Health in South Africa's Gauteng province will launch a measles rubella max vaccination campaign from today until the 12th of September. It says this is in response to the ongoing measles outbreak in the province. Gauteng recorded over 370 confirmed cases since January. The campaign aims to vaccinate over 4 million children aged 6 months to 15 years across all 5 health districts. The department spokesperson, Motale Tale Mudiba.
We calling on parents, guardians, and caregivers to sign and return consent forms distributed through the schools and creches to allow for children to be immunized. It's important that we emphasize that vaccination or immunization is safe, it's free, and it's proven to prevent severe complications and disabilities associated with measles and rubella.
The BBC says its Africa Eye investigation has revealed how women known as madams have involved children as young as 13 in prostitution in Kenya. In the transit town of Mai Miu in Kenya's Rift Valley, trucks and lorries transport goods and people across the country into Uganda, Rwanda, South Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The key transport hub, just 50 kilometers east of the capital Nairobi, is known for prostitution, but the BBC reports that children are also being sexually abused there. The BBC says it gave all its evidence to the Kenyan police in March. The police said the women and young girls who were filmed could not be traced. The BBC reports that to date there have been no arrests. Officials in Haiti say 9 people, including a 3-year-old child, have been kidnapped from an orphanage which cares for more than 240 children, some with disabilities. The victims were taken from the orphanage near the capital Port-au-Prince on Sunday. A local mayor said it was a planned act and that the attackers broke into the building without opening fire. Gang members are thought to be responsible for the attack. No demands or ransom requests have been made. For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulongwebe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Algeria outclass host Uganda in the CHAN 2024 opener. And Alexander Zverev ignores fans' distraction to advance to the ATP Toronto semis. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
Let's go to Cameroon now, where they are heading to the polls on October 12th. That's on the run-up to the presidential election. But this is already fraught with legal drama and rising tensions. The Constitutional Council is currently hearing dozens of appeals from disqualified candidates, including a surprising challenge to longtime President Paul Biya himself. For more, we're joined live from Yaoundé by Channel Africa's correspondent there, Moki Kinzeka. Moki, how are you on this Tuesday?
I'm great, Asanda. Welcome to Yaoundé.
Well, thanks for making time for us this morning. Let's talk about the atmosphere there in terms of what it's like in Yaoundé as the Constitutional Council continues to hear appeals.
Now, Asanda, there have been very tense moments in Yaoundé, especially between the supporters of longtime opposition leader Maurice Kamto and heavily deployed policemen across the capital city, Yaoundé. In fact, there were open confrontations between combat-ready police and supporters of Kamto. About several dozen of the supporters of Maurice Kamto were arrested and taken to cells across the country. Tear gas was used to disperse angry crowds. Thousands of people moving to the Constitutional Council were chased by the police. Live broadcasts on TV channels and on by other social media platforms was prohibited, and a few journalists who dared to stream the hearings using their mobile phones in the Constitutional Council were arrested and taken to unknown destinations. People have been complaining. In fact, as we said earlier on, there have been very tense moments. There is still a heavy deployment of troops in Cameroon's capital, Yaoundé. Deployment of troops because the verdict that is expected is that of Mr. Kamto, which the Constitutional Council says will be delivered today by 3 p.m.
So that big question then on Maurice Kamto, which you mentioned, who is member of the ruling, the opposition, the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, the CRM, which is viewed as the main opposition figure. What does it mean then in terms of how these elections are relating in the opposition landscape?
Now, Asanda, Kamto is no longer a member of the CRM movement or the opposition CRM. He is now a member of the Mediate party. Now, the CRM was not authorized to nominate a candidate for this year's presidential elections following the laws of Cameroon, because the party that nominates a candidate should be represented at the local council or the National Assembly, the parliament. So since the CRM was not represented, Kamto resigned from the CRM party and joined the Manidem party, which has the legal rights to nominate a candidate for the elections. Now, when Kamto resigned and joined the Manidem, there was a problem again raised by the government that the Manidem is fragmented, divided into two. But Kamto is arguing that Manidem is not divided into two. One of the factions of Manidem was actually created by the government to make it impossible for Kamto to take part in the election, because the laws of Cameroon say a party can nominate only one candidate. Surprisingly, when Kamto joined Manidem, the government announced that Manidem was in two factions, a claim that Manidem does not agree, and that's why they are asking Kamto not to run. Why is the elections management body Elecam asked Kamto not to run? Now, the verdict is expected at about 3 o'clock today. It was very tense yesterday. Nobody knows what will be happening, but Cameroonians are appealing to the consciences of members of the Constitutional Council to be able to rule using their consciences, because there's a belief that since the members are single-handedly appointed by President Paul Biya, they may want to eliminate Kamto, who is widely seen as the main challenger, somebody who can change things, who can remove the long-serving Paul Biya from power if the elections are transparent. So everyone in Cameroon, political analysts, journalists, the civil society, they are appealing to the consciences of members of the Constitutional Council to render justice as justice ought to be rendered, not to be influenced by the government.
Talking about Kamto being a challenger, let's talk about another figure, Leon Tellier Onana, who's had a more surprising case when it came to this, because he's within the ruling party, the Cameroon People's Democratic Movement, or CPDM. What can you tell us about how he's challenging President Paul Biya?
That young man has courage. I mean, to stand within Paul Biya's party and challenge him, you need additional courage. Tellier Onana has courage, and he did just that. Now, when he sent his nomination papers to the elections management body, the elections management body said he was not nominated by the CPDM party of President Paul Biya. So he went ahead to the Constitutional Council to challenge, and the hearing was yesterday. I'm telling you, everybody wanted to follow that particular hearing, but unfortunately, it was impossible because the security was deployed and nobody was allowed to take pictures or to record anything in there. But what we gathered after and what we heard from the lawyers afterwards is that the Constitutional Council said it was a non-event, that it is Onana himself, who is also a senior member of the CPDM party of Mr. Paul Biya, who nominated himself as a candidate, but not the CPDM party. But he made his points very clear that even within the CPDM party, there's a lot of dictatorship, that there has been no Congress in the CPDM party since 2011, and the laws of the party states that it's the Congress that nominates a candidate, and he would have loved to challenge Mr. Biya from within during the Congress. Unfortunately, there was no Congress, so he's arguing that Paul Biya should not have been candidate, and that if Paul Biya is candidate and he is candidate from the same party, they should also reject the two files, that is his file and the file of Mr. Paul Biya, as a deed for Kamto, because Kamto was rejected based on the fact that his party nominated two candidates. Tellier Onana is saying that the party, the CPDM, also had two candidates. They should have been rejected, but unfortunately, it was thrown out of the Constitutional Council.
What does it mean then, Onana's case, in terms of how it signals internal divisions within the ruling Cameroon People's Democratic Movement? Can it be viewed as that, or just a fringe incident?
He is representing the views of so many members of that party who are complaining that the party is single-handedly managed by President Paul Biya. So he took the courage. Now, nobody knows where he would have taken the $55,000 as deposit to be candidate, considering that he is from the not too wealthy family. So you could read from it that disgruntled people within President Paul Biya's party support Tele Onana, and that's why he had the courage to go ahead. But in the CPDM party, it's difficult for people to complain about Paul Biya, who has kept ministers, high-ranking government officials, senior state functionaries as members of his party. So they just stayed them quiet, and young people like Tele Onana are now rising with the support from others from behind.
How are the ordinary Cameroonians reacting to these legal battles? You mentioned that they are issuing a call on the conscience of the decision makers and leaders, but are the people of Cameroon hopeful or more frustrated?
People are frustrated in Cameroon. Now, you were talking here about a president who has been in power for 43 years. Listen, Asanda, 43 years as president and about 10 years as prime minister. So he has been over 50 years serving Cameroon in very high positions. No, it's a very, very long time, so Cameroonians are saying. And they're not seeing anything changing. Listen, Mr. Biya is older than the United Nations, older than the Second World War, older than everything you think of. So people are even doubting if his reasoning is good enough. He's not seen in public, So people begin wondering if they're not his collaborators who say he is a candidate. Tele Onana said it in court yesterday that he wanted to see the nomination papers of President Paul Biya to be sure that those papers have the signature of President Paul Biya. The court did not respond. So you understand how frustrated people are, how people think that this regime that's been in power for a long time should give way, either within, that Mr. Paul Biya could give way to another young person within his party, or allow the elections to be free, fair, and transparent. Camerooners complain they have been very poor. They live below the poverty level, that is less than $2-3 a day. They have bad roads, no hospitals. They see some few who are very rich, and then the vast majority are poor. Young people leave schools, they leave colleges, they don't have jobs. They struggle to go to Europe at all costs. So you could imagine the frustration that is among Cameroonian people who think that this election should come quickly so that there are changes. But unfortunately also, it doesn't seem there will be any change in Cameroon yet, because we have noticed in the past elections they're just like something else. I mean, Paul Biya is just organizing to give an impression. That's what the Cameroonians say, that he is democratic when he wants to rule with an iron fist and confiscate power until he dies in power.
Looking ahead, and just briefly, Moki, what are the key moments to watch now as the country moves to October 12th, Election Day?
I'm very certain that there are going to be protests because people are disgruntled. They may be, as from today at 3 o'clock, when the verdict concerning Kamto will be made public at the Constitutional Council. I'm telling you, if Kamto is refused, if his nomination papers are rejected by the Constitutional Council, then what we saw yesterday will just be the tip of the iceberg, because people were angry. Thousands were moving to the Constitutional Council. Scores were arrested, and that was only in Yaoundé. In Douala and the other major cities, people have been disgruntled. And the main thing will be happening now will be on the day of elections itself. I am not a prophet of doom, but from all indications and from what political analysts are saying, Paul Biya will win the elections, even if he doesn't go to campaign, even if people don't see him, because they have been prepared for him to win.
Okay, let's thank you again for your time, and we'll be getting in touch to get more on the developments in Cameroon with the elections.
Thanks, Asanda.
Thank you. Moki Kinzeka is our Yaoundé correspondent, Channel Africa's Cameroonian correspondent there.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
Let's go to West Africa now. Excuse me. Tensions are mounting in Côte d'Ivoire. Just months ahead of presidential elections in the country, 6 senior members of the Six senior members of the opposition African People's Party have been arrested following violent clashes in Abidjan. Now, the arrests are being condemned by opposition leaders as politically motivated, with concerns growing over the shrinking democratic space as President Alassane Ouattara seeks an unprecedented 4th term in office. Meanwhile, opposition figures such as former President Laurent Gbagbo continue to face legal and political hurdles. To unpack what all of this means for Côte d'Ivoire's democracy and the wider region, we're now joined by Austin Aigbe, who's Advocacy Officer at the West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network. Austin, thanks so much for joining us. Always good to talk to you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and good morning, everyone.
Austin, how are the arrests of 6 African People's Party members being justified by the Ivorian authorities, and what's your initial reaction to that?
So what's happening in Côte d'Ivoire at the moment is because Alassane Ouattara has formally declared his intention to run. Before now, there has been no protest, no killings, no arrest, no intimidation. The political atmosphere looks a bit fair and it's going on in the way that is smooth. But the moment became the official candidate, recognizing that he may not get the smooth ride, so he led to be able to arrest the critical mass of people in the opposition party. The people he arrested, those leaders he arrested in the African People's Party, are the major actors who are mobilizing support for the opposition party, as it were. And the limelight is looking like, with these actors, Alassane Ouattara may not have a smooth ride. And what has happened now is that there will be major, like just coming up from Cameroon, there's going to be, beginning from this arrest, is going to be back-to-back electoral situation, violence in Côte d'Ivoire, leading up to the election in October. And if you remember, the last election was almost it's going to be like almost like a repetition, because last election when Ouattara went for a third term in office, there was protest, feelings, intimidation, frustrations, and in fact, he became president. This is the 5th year, so it's going for another round for a 4th term, which means what we saw on the round of the 4th term may be almost like a double challenge in the 4th round. So, I mean, Côte d'Ivoire is heading towards a more destabilizing situation if there's no international intervention.
With all of these arrests and political hurdles for opposition parties, I wonder also with the Electoral Commission there, is it showing any independence, impartiality at this stage, or is there a risk as well that the referee is perhaps not fair?
A referee that is appointed by someone in the race cannot be a true referee. It cannot be a true umpire. And that is a bane of Africa's development, particularly the backsliding, the democratic backsliding that is happening right now in West Africa. Usually, incumbents, particularly president of countries, are responsible for the appointment of the electoral management bodies. All of the actors, unlike maybe Kenya, maybe part of South Africa. But if you look at Ghana, Nigeria, particularly Nigeria, even though Nigeria is supposed to be a very strong democracy as it were, but the president appoints the electoral management body. So in Côte d'Ivoire, everything that has to do with governance institutions, including democratic institutions, are appointed by the president. And the president, who has been in power for 12 years, are literally taking over all those architectures. So you don't expect any, I repeat, underline the word, any response that look like favoring the opposition party from the electoral management body. If they do, they may actually be in a conflict, with President Alassane Ouattara. So it's clear. And that is why the only forces that will be against Alassane Ouattara will be the people on election day. State security architecture may be used on election day, and that is a challenge, and that is why leadership is the bane of African development, particularly in our democratic architecture. But before now, we used to say it is the political party system that is the weakest link in democratic consolidation. But right now, it is the leaders who perpetuate themselves in power, who change their constitution, who elevate themselves in power, that is killing democracy sub-region. There is nothing going to come up from the electoral management body because, I mean, they will even justify whatever is happening because they are not the ones who arrested the opposition, and they cannot claim to know. After all, the Ivorian government has said they are not even aware that they've been arrested. So who arrested them?
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately, Austin, but always good talking to you. Thank you so much indeed for your insights.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's Austin Aigbe, Advocacy Officer at the West African Democracy Solidarity Network, concerned about the upcoming Ivorian elections.
From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
Let's go to Sudan now, where hundreds of thousands of people under siege in the Sudanese army's last holdout in the western Darfur region are running out of food and coming under constant artillery and drone barrages, while those who flee risk cholera and violent attacks. Meanwhile, the Norwegian Refugee Council has expressed concern that cholera is spreading rapidly in North Darfur and the transmission rate is increasing. Over the last 3 months, about 300,000 people fled the war to Tawila, propelling the small town into a full-scale humanitarian crisis. To talk to us further on this, we're joined now on the line by Matilda Vu, the Advocacy Manager for the Norwegian Refugee Council in Sudan. Matilda, thank you for joining us. How are you this Tuesday?
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate you making time. Please paint a picture for us in terms of what the situation is like on the ground in North Darfur.
It's absolutely catastrophic. As you just mentioned, people have fled horror, a year of starvation, bombing. They risked their lives, on their way to safety. And now they arrive in this town of Tawila, where there is very little assistance compared to the needs. And they're faced with one of the most important and spiraling cholera crises. Just last week in those camps, 1,500 new cases of cholera. This is completely getting out of control, and this is a very, very dangerous disease that can kill. So people are completely deprived of everything to the basics, and they really fear for their lives.
How are humanitarian organizations coping with the situation, and what additional assistance is needed?
We're completely overwhelmed. There are a small number of organizations like mine who are working in Tawila right now, working day and night, and we're not even managing to contain the epidemics. Just an example, for example, you need 15,800 latrines, toilets, to reach the basic standard. And the basic standard is one latrine being shared by 20 people. This is how bad the gaps are. Like access to water is terrible, access to sanitation, management of waste, and then let alone access to, the basics like food and health. We're just not there because we don't have the resources to do so.
Do we know what about Tawila has propelled 300,000 people to flee the war into this town? Is it seen as safer than other areas in North Darfur?
Comparatively, yes, it is. It is safer. It is the closest area to Al Fasher. Al Fasher is the capital of North Darfur, where the conflict has been raging now for non-stop since the beginning of the war, and where people have been besieged and bombed and starved. And so people have had no other choices but to flee to Tawila. They don't know anyone there. They live in makeshift shelter. And when I say makeshift shelter, they're just sleeping under cloth sometimes as the rainy season is going to start. And they just have no more money, no more energy, no more strength to go elsewhere. And this is where they're stuck.
As the Norwegian Refugee Council, what kind of assistance are you able to offer at this stage on food as well as the cholera outbreak?
We're helping in the management of the camp. There's like 250,000 people who are in these camps, and we are coordinating all the services there. We're helping with distributing cash, quite a lot of cash that we're trying to distribute to people so that they can buy the basics. But the prices in the market are getting completely unaffordable. And so for people to even buy something is really a struggle. And especially where they're not even managing to find what is the most important for cholera, which is aquatab, the purifying tablets for the water is just missing. You just can't buy it anywhere right now in Darfur. And we're also like helping children to, recover from the terrible ordeal that they've been through. We're opening, schools and trying to give them a little bit of normalcy as they live a complete different and terrifying reality right now.
As you speak of collaborations, and how big of a part will research play in terms of your own research as the Norwegian Refugee Council and in collaborating with other humanitarian bodies in getting especially the right figures so that you can get the right amount of aid needed?
It's extremely difficult, to get any figures right in Darfur for many reasons. Just, talk about the cholera, for example. We don't even know the actual number. My teams on the ground estimate that just since the beginning of July, this place of Tawila has had 4,500 cases. There might be way more. Some people never reach, the centers of cholera treatment. They just die. And these cases are unreported. There's a lot of stigma as well. People are scared to report that they're sick. Everything is underreported in Sudan. The number of deaths, the number of people displaced, the people who are quietly, silently dying of hunger. What the world needs to know is that you don't need the perfect figure because the numbers are terrible. We're talking about the largest displacement crisis in the world. Doesn't really matter if it's a change of like hundreds of thousands. People are dying in Sudan, and there's just simply not enough resources at all to make them survive.
Matilda, thanks again for shedding more light on this matter. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Matilda Vu is the advocacy manager for the Norwegian Refugee Council. They're operating in Sudan, tackling issues of food shortages there and a cholera outbreak that's rapidly increasing and is getting out of control. 7:30 Central African time it is. Let's say good morning to Jwalani Tulo Ngwebe. She has our news headlines.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria, South Africa will later this week hand down judgment in the Zambian government's main application to challenge the final resting place of the late former President Edgar Lungu. The BBC says its Africa Eye investigation has revealed how women known as madams have involved children as young as 13 in prostitution in Kenya, and finally officials in Haiti say 9 people, including a 3-year-old child, have been kidnapped from an orphanage which cares for more than 240 children, some with disabilities. I will have details on these and other stories at 8 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
It's time now for your sport, and I've got to say I was watching the test match between India and England yesterday. India won by 6 runs, but you know what? That doesn't even begin to tell the story. England were playing with a batsman with one arm. So let's find out what happened. Here's Figile Lingwat.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
In this hour, we begin with football news. Algeria made a commanding start to their Total Energies CAF African Nations Championship CHAN Pamoja 2024 campaign with a clinical 3-0 victory over co-host Uganda at a packed Nelson Mandela National Stadium in Kampala on Monday evening. Goals from Ayub Gezala, Abderrahmane Meziani and Sofiane Bayazid sealed the win for the North African Giants, who once again displayed their tournament pedigree with an organized, composed and tactically efficient performance that left the Cranes chasing shadows. The result marks Algeria's third consecutive win over Uganda at Chan, extending their unbeaten group stage record in the competition to 7 matches. For Uganda, it was a sobering return to familiar struggles as their hunt for the first ever knockout appearance at Chan continues. Uganda will hope to bounce back in the second Group C match against South Africa, while Algeria face Niger next and could seal early qualification with another victory. On to rugby news, Ireland star Dan Sheehan has been cited for his clear out on Tom Leonard in the third test match between Australia and the British and the Irish Lions at the weekend. The incident was missed by the matchday officials during the game, with Wallabies playmaker Leonard forced off the pitch and did not return after failing his HIA. However, he was cited by the Independent Citing Commissioner Adrian Menez for an act of foul play contrary to Law 9.20A, which reads dangerous play in a ruck or maul. South Africa's Proteas left-arm spinner Keshav Maharaj says he intends to play international cricket until he's 40. Maharaj was named cricket's SA's Men's Player of the Season last week and has no intentions of stopping anytime soon. He says the only thing that will change his mind is if he loses the appetite for the game in the coming years.
I always said I'd like to get to 40 in international cricket, but it just depends on how the body goes and how I wake up the next day. If I ever lose the passion to bowl, I have to walk away and be honored to the game. But from a team perspective, obviously having a taste of success, hopefully it unlocks many doors. But I think this is a wonderful opportunity for the team to sort of look back on the things that we did well, but also try and find ways in which we can evolve, because obviously people know the brand and style we're going to play and want to catch us. So hopefully we can be the leaders in the pack and really set the foundation when we do start the season, for this next cycle.
Let's end with tennis news. Alexander Zverev reached his 21st Masters 1000 semi-final by ending the Canadian title defense of Alexei Popyrin 6-7, 8-10 tie-breaker 6-4, 6-3 at the ATP Toronto Masters. The final game, with Zverev serving at 5-3, was interrupted by shouts from an unruly fan who was tossed out by security. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fide Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Ukatili wa kijinsia unaharibu maisha na kutenga jamii. Hutokea nyumbani, shuleni, kazini na mara nyingi kwa ukimya. Lakini hauwezi kuendelea. Ukiona, ongea. Ikiwa unaumia, funguka, kwa sababu kutofanya lolote sio chaguo. Sikiliza vituo vyote 19 vya redio kuanzia Jumatano ya tarehe 23 Julai kwenye mijadala, ushauri, tamthilia, maonyesho ya elimu na mahojiano na wataalamu, manusura, watunga sheria na nchi nzima iliyoathirika na ukatili wa kijinsia kwenye vituo vyako pendwa vya redio. Piga simu 0800 428 428 ili kuripoti unyanyasaji au kupata msaada. GBV, ikomeshwe na wewe. Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwenu na shirika la SABC.
Let's check in now with the world of business. Here's Tabiso Lehuku with our latest economics update.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. African countries have been urged to continue to engage with the US to try find a solution to the new set of tariffs. These range from 10 to 30%, with the 4 countries, Libya, South Africa, Algeria and Tunisia, facing some of the highest tariffs imposed by the Trump administration. Experts believe that the tariffs will have ripple effects on products that are only aimed at the US markets. Some countries like Zimbabwe have offered to unilaterally eliminate tariffs on U.S. imports, while others like Uganda have resolved to build more resilient and self-sustaining domestic economies. Dita Batsotezi reports.
Lamola says Africa should also consider the African Continental Free Trade Area for intra-African trade and economic integration.
South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, has lambasted some members of the Government of National Unity and opposition parties for what he says is trying to score cheap political points aimed at the looming 30% US tariffs. The tariffs threaten thousands of jobs in industries like agriculture and car manufacturing. Lamola was addressing a joint media briefing in Pretoria with the Department of Trade and Industry. He says government is working on ways to mitigate job losses.
Our view is that all of us as South Africans, irrespective of our political affiliations, whether you're an opposition, NGO, business, or in government, GNU, partner, or anything, once you get out of South Africa, we all have a responsibility to promote the national interest of South Africa.
The ANC party has encouraged exporters to diversify their markets, while government is working to normalize relations with the US as the 30% tariffs loom for South African goods. The tariffs are expected to take effect on Thursday if a new trade deal isn't reached. This came at the end of the 4-day ANC-NEC meeting in Germiston, east of Johannesburg. In his closing remarks, ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa said they will continue to engage as the Trump administration. He also encouraged local exporters to take advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area and diversifying their export markets.
While we must act with urgency and purpose to limit the impact of these very punitive tariffs, we must also undertake measures to ensure the resilience of our economy and exports into the future.
Nigeria's oil production surpassed 1.8 million barrels per day last month, with current average output at 1.78 million barrels per day. The West African country, Africa's largest oil producer, relies on crude oil for nearly two-thirds of government revenue and over 80% of foreign currency earnings, making production gains critical for stabilizing its economy. But widespread oil theft, unrest, and years of underinvestment curtailed output and strained public finances before Nigeria stepped up a crackdown in the oil-rich Niger Delta region. Shares in Asia rose for a second consecutive session, and the US dollar held most of its losses on as investors increased bets. The Federal Reserve will act to prop up the world's largest economy. US shares rallied on Monday on generally positive earnings reports and increasing bets for a September rate cut from the Federal after disappointing jobs data on Friday. Oil remained lower after output increases by OPEC Plus and threats by US President Donald Trump to raise tariffs on India over its Russian petroleum purchases. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,521 naira. In Botswana, it's at 13.38. In Kenya, it's at 128 shilling 188, and in Zambia, it's at 22 kwacha 69. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar will cost you 5.53. Russia, 79 rubles 87. India, 79 rupees 69. China, 71.18. And in South Africa, the dollar will cost you 17 rand 98 cents. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Gold is trading at $3,373 and platinum $1,325 per ounce. Brand crude oil is at $68.61 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Tabisolo Hoku.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Je, una jambo lolote akilini mwako? Je, una shauku kuhusu masuala muhimu? Na je, una maoni ambayo unataka yasikike? Kweli, hili jukwaa ni la kwako. Piga simu au tuandikie kwenda WhatsApp namba alama ya kujumulisha 2760552594 na tutakupigia simu.
Mtangazaji wa habari zetu za Afrika Kusini mjini Johannesburg.
Hivyo unaweza kuwa mshirika kwenye matangazo yetu. Sio mazungumzo tu, ni fursa yako ya kuchangia maoni yako na kushirikiana na jumuiya ya wasikilizaji wanaotamani mtazamo wako. Tufuate kwenye mitandao ya kijamii. Tembelea tovuti yetu www.channelafrica.co.za na uwe tayari kushiriki na kuchangia maoni yako kwenye Channel Africa. Channel Africa, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
South Africa's African National Congress political party president Cyril Ramaphosa says despite all the pushback from some quarters against the Government of National Unity, or the GNU, the pact remains the correct tactic that has brought stability and addressed the people's challenges. He was speaking at the end of the 4-day ANC National Executive Committee meeting in Germiston, that's east of Johannesburg, last night. The ANC also expressed its concern over the South African Communist Party, the decision to contest future elections independently. Ntebo Mukobo has more.
The 4-day meeting of the ANC's highest decision-making body in between conferences was called to discuss a wide range of issues, including challenges facing the GNU, the SACP's decision to contest future elections independently, as well as the US tariffs imposed on South African goods, among others. Recently, relations between the major parties in the GNU, the DA and the ANC took a knock after the dismissal of the DA deputy minister, and subsequent to that, the DA walked out of the GNU-backed national dialogue. This has forced some within the ANC to call for the expulsion of the DA from the 10-party pact. Critics of the GNU have also predicted the collapse of this arrangement. But ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa says despite all this, the GNU remains a correct path to change the people's conditions for the better.
The overall picture is that despite all the noise, through the GNU, we've been able to safeguard the core progressive policy agenda of the National Democratic Revolution, which is the core pillar of ANC policies. The NEC's view is that the tactic of the Government of National Unity has enabled the ANC to continue to execute its agenda for nation building and fundamental socio-economic transformation of South Africa. The NEC reaffirms the view that the GNU is a correct tactic and remains valid.
The ANC president said for now the GNU remains a hope for the people of South Africa.
This cooperation is a real demonstration of acting in the interests of the people of South Africa. And we are grateful to all those parties that cooperated with us to have the budget passed. In our assessment, we have concluded that the decision to establish the Government of National Unity was correct. Our people appreciate that it has brought stability and enabled progress in addressing their challenges.
He also said the NEC expressed its concern over the SACP's decision to go it alone in the forthcoming local elections, insisting that this could have far-reaching implications for the broader alliance.
As the ANC, we have no wish, nor do we have any intention to interfere with the decision that the South African Communist Party has taken. However, we disagree with the decision. This decision has fundamental implications for the strategy and program of the National Democratic Revolution and the alliance that has led the struggle for liberation in our country since the 1920s. As the ANC, we are seriously concerned that this decision to participate in elections in their own name and right will significantly weaken the forces for national democratic change.
The ANC also said efforts are afoot to resuscitate the ailing economy, which the president said has now become a national emergency.
We characterize the state of our economy as being in a state of emergency that requires drastic action. Our discussion on the economy focused on the actions that we need to take to give effect to the strategic priority of inclusive growth, and job creation, as clearly contained in the medium-term development plan adopted by the government. We have reaffirmed that industrial policy must be the leading instrument of economic development and transformation, which will in turn help to shape our trade policy. For this industrial policy to succeed, we need an all-of-government approach.
ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula will unpack some of the NEC resolutions at a media briefing in Johannesburg this morning. I am Tebo Mokobe in Jamestown.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. The rhythm of Africa, the pulse of the continent. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Now, when most people think of ADHD, excuse me, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, they picture hyperactive young boys struggling to sit in class. But growing evidence of ADHD is significantly undiagnosed and misunderstood, especially in women and girls, and often leading to years of silent struggle. Now, as South Africa marks Women's Month, the South African Society of Psychiatrists is calling for greater awareness on how ADHD presents differently in women and why so many go undiagnosed well into adulthood. According to global data from CDC, boys are nearly twice as likely to be diagnosed with ADHD as girls. And for those women who do get diagnosed, it often comes years, maybe even decades after symptoms begin. Well, to help us understand this phenomena and this gender gap and what can be done about it, we're now joined by Dr. Lavina Lumu-Tabete, who's a member of the South African Society of Psychiatrists. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program to you, Dr. Lumu-Tabete.
Thank you so much, Peter, for having me and to discuss this very important topic.
All right, let's start with the basics. I mean, what exactly is ADHD and how is it typically diagnosed?
So ADHD is essentially a neurodevelopmental disorder, meaning that a person is probably born with it, and it's influenced by how the brain develops. Essentially, what happens is that in the frontal lobe, which is your part of the brain that's responsible for executive functioning, like planning, organization, the one of the hormones, dopamine, is not enough. So essentially, how it then manifests is in behavioral and other problems that affect one's ability to think clearly and focus. So there are many components to it, but there are three types of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. You have the hyperactivity type or the impulsive type, which often affects boys, where you see a child running around, can't sit still. And then there's a quieter one, which is the inattentive type, which tends to affect girls more, whereby the person cannot concentrate, cannot focus, gets easily distracted, and daydreams.
All right, so the issue at hand here is why the condition is so overlooked in women and girls. Do we know why?
The issue is overall with ADHD, it is, there's a lot of stigma around having the diagnosis of ADHD, and what often happens, it's only the hyperactive type or the impulsive type that gets picked up and it typically affects boys. So they're the ones that are disruptive in class, whereas a child tends to have the more inattentive type of ADHD, where they are daydreamers, they drift off, they can't focus, and because of that, because the girl is usually sitting quietly, that's why it's often missed.
What are some of the common symptoms in ADHD in women, especially those that may be misunderstood or missed entirely?
So one of the common things is that often because the girl sits quietly in class, she's often missed. but the impulsivity can manifest and carry on into adulthood. With ADHD, they did think that, most people grow out of it, but what we are starting to see is that up to 60% of people carry on with ADHD into adulthood. And specifically in women, the impulsivity and the inattentiveness can persist. It can manifest with impulsive shopping or buying excessively, binge eating. It often misdiagnoses anxiety or depressive symptoms. Sometimes when the symptoms are there, present, a lot of women then try to compensate by being overly perfect, trying to be a perfectionist, to try and compensate for this condition. And also there's a lot of other symptoms whereby, though, there's a lot of chaos in terms of being disorganized and a need to people please, and that can result in difficulty in setting boundaries and leading to burnout. So it's very difficult to pick up, and I think in women they do get misdiagnosed as a result.
I think you might have given us some clues in terms of my next question. Undiagnosed ADHD in women, this must affect a number of areas in their lives. Mental health, careers, relationships, maybe even self-esteem.
Oh, definitely. Imagine not being able to keep up in a meeting or in friendships and relationships, remembering important things. That can have problems in relationships, and especially for women. Women already are expected to multitask quite a bit, especially entering into motherhood. The impulsiveness of doing things can result in debt, in difficulty in staying in one job because of these symptoms. And the challenge is, it comes in varying degrees. So depending on the severity of symptoms will determine the severity of comorbid mental health issues that the woman can present with.
I suppose awareness is a big challenge. Is there enough knowledge that maybe even our first healthcare providers have, like our GPs, first line of call? Do you think they know enough to be able to recognize these symptoms?
Well, it is challenging in making the diagnosis of ADHD, especially in a GP setting, but one of the clues could be related to when someone is struggling in work or academics. I think those are some of the clues to look out for. Usually in more than one setting, one would have symptoms. And the treatment is available. And I think the biggest challenge is currently the treatment for ADHD, when required, is quite expensive. It's extremely expensive, and it's not really covered and not easily available in government settings and also in the private sector. What we find is some forms of medical aid would probably pay for the medication if a person is of school-going age. But the challenge is when the person goes out into sort of furthering their career and personal lives. And specifically for women, I think because of the misdiagnosis, some women go through years and years of being misdiagnosed with something else, medications not responding, and meanwhile, all they had was ADHD.
State institutions, hospitals, do you think that they take it as a serious condition, or is that part of the reason why there's not enough help, especially when it comes to treatment and medication?
I think the state facilities are overburdened at the moment, and I think currently most state facilities only cater to 10% of the sickest or the illest affected with mental illness. awareness is still needed because this condition can result in a lot of chaos and dysfunction, and specifically for a woman. I mean, imagine having to keep up and juggling everything that we have to in life and not being able to because of medication affecting job, career, prospects. Some people, because of the impulsive spending as a form of escapism, can end up in quite significant debt. Small things that we take for granted, like road rage, reckless driving, because of the impulsivity, increased risk for substance and alcohol use. These are all the consequences of untreated ADHD.
All right, we've run out of time, but in 30 seconds, what do you say to people who don't know they've got it, might have it? What should they be looking at and thinking, this isn't just a thing I'm feeling, there might be something wrong?
So quickly, I mean, if anyone has symptoms, if you were the child that was the class clown, the chatterbox, always in trouble, so it has to have started in childhood and progress into adulthood, and you start something but you lose interest, you can't finish anything, you can't follow through. Please go to your nearest healthcare provider and get assessed, because there is treatment available, and there are also many non-medical ways to manage it as well, but the effective treatments available to help.
Dr. Lavina Lumutabete, thanks so much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
All right, so that's ADHD, which sadly is not diagnosed often enough amongst girl children and women. So we're shining the spotlight on this issue today. Eight o'clock Central African Time. This is the final hour of the program, and I'm Peter Ndoro, broadcasting with Asanda Beda from Johannesburg in South Africa on www.channelafrica.co.za. Asanda, you've got an interesting conversation coming up.
A very good morning, everyone, as we enter the third hour of Rise and Shine. So in this hour, we'll be looking at the South African government in terms of their response to the increased U.S. tariff and how this could cause tens of thousands of job losses. We'll be in conversation with Professor Lawrence Edwards, who is professor in the School of Economics and a research associate at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. Of course, that 30% tariff having kicked off on the 1st of August for this country. But right now, let's get our news update. Here's Jwalani Tulo Mwepe, and then following her is Fikile Lingwati with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. The Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission has dismissed reports suggesting that it recently engaged South Africa's public protector regarding its citizens being denied access to healthcare services in the country. The Commission says that it only had a conversation with the public protector during a benchmark visit last year on various issues of concern. It has, however, raised concern over reports of public health facility refusing treatment based on nationality or documentation. The Commission's chairperson, Jessie Majome, says they will engage the public protector on the matter.
During the benchmarking visit that the South African Public Protector, Advocate Koleka Taleka, graciously hosted us in, we had a conversation in which we mutually expressed concern and agreed that we need to engage about this problem of the conflict that has arisen in South Africa regarding the seeking and sometimes the barring of access to healthcare by Zimbabweans. We planned and we agreed that we were going to formally engage each other so that we could find solutions. This was before this has escalated as this.
Palestinian protesters in South Africa are being hauled to court to prevent them from protesting outside Cape Union Mart stores. The protesters claim Jewish business leader Philip Kravitz is a supporter of Israel. At least 4 protesters are expected to appear in the High Court this morning. Palestine Solidarity Campaign's coordinator, Professor Yusuf Chikde.
This legal attack is a blatant act of Zionist warfare, an attempt to bully us and to silence those who dare to protest genocide and apartheid. Kravitz seeks to block our constitutionally protected right to call for the boycott of persons complicit in the atrocities being carried out in Gaza, where Israel is starving people to death.
The Gauteng High Court in Pretoria, South Africa, will later this week hand down judgment in the Zambian government's main application to challenge the final resting place of the late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu. The Lungu family want the former president to be buried in South Africa, while the Zambian government believes that he should be repatriated to the country and be buried in Embassy Park in the capital, Lusaka. Following yesterday's court proceedings, Zambia's Attorney General Mulilo Kabesha says he's happy with how things unfolded.
I'm very happy. Yeah, I'm very satisfied with how the matter proceeded. Both parties argued the matter, and the court was very calm and the court gave each side the time they needed to. None of the parties was cut in terms of stopping, but court was just asking for clarifications.
The BBC says its Africa Eye investigation has revealed how women known as madams have involved children as young as 13 in prostitution in Kenya. In the transit town of Mahiu, the Kenya's Rift Valley, trucks and lorries transport goods and people across the country into Uganda, Rwanda, South Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The key transport hub, just 50 kilometers east of the capital Nairobi, is known for prostitution, but the BBC reports that children are also being sexually abused there. The BBC says it gave all its evidence to the Kenyan police in March. The police said the women and young girls who were filmed could not be traced. The BBC reports that to date there have been no arrests. And finally, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he will update his military plan for Gaza later this week amid reports that he wants to expand the offensive against Hamas and occupy the entire territory. The BBC's John Donison has the story.
The Israeli media were being briefed by an anonymous Israeli official that the war could be expanded. A lot of people think that official was Prime Minister Netanyahu himself. And despite 600 former Israeli security officials, including heads of the intelligence agencies, a former prime minister, all of them warning that militarily there is nothing left to achieve in Gaza and that Hamas is no longer a credible, threatening force.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulongwebe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Rwanda national football team will embark on a residential training camp for the upcoming World Cup qualifiers. And Alexander Zverev ignores fan distraction to advance the ATP Toronto semis. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
As trade relations between South Africa and the United States continue to decline, South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, says the country is now diversifying its trade partners and exploring alternative markets, including China. Lamola noted that the impact on the economy is expected to be minimal, around 0.2% of South Africa's GDP growth. It is estimated that 30,000 jobs are at risk. He emphasized that the country's economic future remains resilient. Lamola was speaking during a media briefing in Johannesburg, South Africa, alongside officials from the Department of Trade and Industry. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Semusa has more.
The United States is South Africa's third trading partner. However, relations have soured in recent years, most notably when the country was hit hard by the 30% tariff imposed under U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, South Africa is seeking to diversify its trade markets. Ronald Lamola, Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, says efforts are underway to explore alternative economic partnerships.
South Africa isn't just a trading partner. We are a major investor in the US, with our companies sustaining American jobs. Similarly, over 600 US companies in South Africa contribute to our industrial growth and create employment. Our goal is to preserve and grow this mutual beneficial relationship. Impact of the tariffs. The uncertainty of the new tariffs is already incorporated into economic projections. For example, various economists estimated that it may shave off 0.2% of South Africa's economic growth. The reduction in growth from the 30% tariffs depends on a number of factors, including our ability to find alternative markets.
While exemptions have been granted for copper, stainless steel and energy products, South Africa disagrees with how the trade deficit is being calculated. It's estimated that 30,000 jobs are at risk. Minister Ronald Lamola says they are working closely with the Department of Labour to address potential job losses.
It should be noted, however, that 85% of South Africa's exports remain exempted from the tariffs. All applicable exemptions published in the previous U.S. executive order are said to remain in force, and these exemptions covers products such as copper, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, lumber articles, certain critical minerals, stainless steel scrap, and energy products.
While acknowledging the challenges, the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Pakstau, highlighted that the situation presents an opportunity to further strengthen the African Continental Free Trade Area.
With regards to the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, we are working with our colleagues in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. As indicated earlier, we have also ratified various protocols. We are accelerating work to address what are some of the niggly issues that need resolution, including issues on rules of origin with regards to the auto sector, clothing and textile. So there's a lot of work that we're doing in relation to the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. So certainly I think that we should be able to make progress. There is a realization amongst colleagues that in fact it is important that we address what are the impediments to the implementation.
As tensions with the United States continue to reshape South Africa's trade landscape, government officials remain focused on safeguarding jobs and securing new partnerships. For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg.
From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
The South African government says the increased U.S. tariff could cause tens of thousands of job losses, especially in the agriculture and car manufacturing industries. South Africa was officially responding to the American President Donald Trump imposing a 30% hike on goods imported from South Africa to the U.S. The country is one of many that have faced the U.S. tariff hikes as the Trump administration pushes to reshape global trade in favor of the U.S. Now, to discuss this, we are joined and to look at how the U.S. blanket tariff hike has reshaped the global trade. We're joined by Professor Lawrence Edwards, who is a professor in the School of Economics and a research associate at the University of Cape Town, that's here in South Africa. Professor Edwards, thank you so much for making time for us this morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
We appreciate your time. Can there, and let's start on a generalized answer, I guess, and question, can there be a way to reach a trade relations deal that will be mutually beneficial to South Africa and the U.S.? Will this always be a case of that one has to compromise? Let's start there.
Well, that's a tough question in that trade essentially can and usually is mutually beneficial. I mean, we import quite a lot of U.S. goods. Because we don't produce them, we export quite a lot of goods to the United States that they don't actually produce, and that's mutually beneficial. I think this particular scenario here is about reshaping who gains and how much each country gains. And the US has felt that it's not gaining enough out of the trade agreement. And therefore, they are trying to reorientate, I think, the trade relations to benefit them so that they capture more of the mutual gains. But ultimately, trade is about mutual beneficial gains. I think this issue here, though, does pose a real consideration for us because the gains we are getting from trade are stand to substantially diminish because of the tariffs and the increased barriers we will face getting into the US market.
South Africa is saying that it's committed to further discussions with the US, and the country says the situation is an opportunity to look east and merge relations with other economic players. But if we look at the long-standing bilateral issues that could form blocks to South Africa successfully engaging the US on favorable trade, what would those be for South Africa?
Well, I think, firstly, it's very uncertain about what some of the key concerns are. I mean, the US has raised several concerns around our trade relations with them. For example, they're concerned about access into the South African market for certain products like blueberries, poultry, etc. They're worried about some of our restrictions on agricultural trade that we impose in the US. For some of these are for health reasons, and so they need to be there. They're also worried about unfair investment environment, for example, where we have preferences for government preference for local firms as opposed to general firms, including the US firms. So there's some key issues around trade relations and relationships that have been identified. Of course, there are big political issues, and I think these bigger political issues are harder to put your thumb on and try and isolate precisely what the concern is. But I think our strong association and links in the BRICS group is of concern to the United States. Our reorientation, I think, towards trade and political relations to the East, I think, is also a concern for the US in terms of their standing in the global order. And so these political dimensions, I think, complement or exacerbate some of the trade concerns that they have as well. And then, of course, they've raised certain issues around South Africa's domestic policies, around land restitution, etc. And so that's added a third element into the mix. So it's a really complicated mix of issues. And the concern here really is the instrument of tariffs to try and solve all of those aspects is a misplaced approach and a policy, I think, by the US to deal with those. And it places us in a very difficult situation because to some extent it's not precisely clear how we can resolve many of their concerns or even what their specific concerns are. And that places, I think, our ministers in a very difficult position to try and respond and resolve and negotiate a deal that can resolve some of the constraints that have been identified.
Talking of clarity, Professor, then there is trading partner versus investor. Should we be making a differentiation between the two, and does South Africa fit both roles when it comes to the US?
Well, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. If you look at South African economy, we host and hold many US companies, over 600 US companies. And in fact, these companies earn large profits, they earn returns from the investments in South Africa. In fact, they use South Africa as a gateway into Africa. And so when we look, for example, at what's called the primary income transfers, these are the repayments of profits from firms located in South Africa to the United States. What we see is that they're very large and they're positive. So in other words, for the US investors in South African economy are benefiting enormously, and this is of great positive benefit for the United States. Now that's an investor relation as well. Now that's not unlinked from the trade relation, because some of these firms, take Ford for example, which is a US firm located in South Africa, which is set up about selling goods into Africa and also selling goods into the United States. So some of these investors are strongly linked to established trade ties and trade links between the economies, and actually between South Africa and the rest of the globe. So these investors are closely linked to trade. On the other hand, we also have pure trade benefits, which are unrelated to US investors. Take our citrus firms. Our citrus producers are exporting citrus to the United States. This is a pure trade relationship. It's not directly linked to investment. But in many cases, the two go together.
South Africa says it's made numerous efforts in reaching out to the US and offering investment in trade deals, but all was unsuccessful. So, despite South Africa putting forward a framework deal in May of this year to deal with the US trade deficit, this 30% unilateral tariff was implemented. Does it mean that that framework proposed fell short on certain issues, or was it an issue of timing?
Well, I think it's an issue of the US government finding out actually what they can get out of these agreements. And so our approach was a quid pro quo approach. We would reduce some of our barriers, and we would try and encourage and reduce restrictions in accessing the US market, and so that we could mutually benefit from this and improve trade relations. Contrast this, for example, with Vietnam and Korea, which essentially went and said, we will remove all our barriers to trade into our domestic market, just so that the US lowers their tariffs on us to 15 or 19 or 20%, etc. It's a very different negotiation style. Essentially, our outcomes, effectively, it's like these economies are arguing, we will give up everything just to reduce the barriers facing us to get into the US market. And so that approach, I think, has been emerging. What's emerging also at the moment is the requirement that countries commit large-scale investments into the United States as part of the deal. And so this is a changing landscape, and the target is changing all the time. And so I think we will have to relook at our framework agreement. We will have to be, if we want to find an agreement, we're going to have to be much more concessionary. We're going to have to give larger concessions. We will need to be much clearer on our investment opportunities or goals or commitments to invest in the United States in order to try and find an agreement. I'd have to say that I think it's going to be very, very hard because we're very small. While the US matters a lot to us, we don't actually matter that much to the US outside of selected key products. And so I don't think we're top on the priority list of forming and negotiating a trade deal. And I think this places us in even a weaker position with respect to negotiating with the United States. And I think this really then talks about finding and starting to work towards creating alternative markets and establishing longer term institutional trade linkages with other countries to try and lock in our exporters into those markets and lock ourselves into their growth path, because the US is not such a reliable partner at the moment, and the prospects of resolving a quick deal do not seem to be on the table at the moment.
In making amendments to this framework deal, which industries should be prioritized?
Well, I think there are several key issues and key industries. And clearly, vehicles is a big issue for us. We are facing a 25% tariff into the US market. This is under what's called the Section 232 tariffs. And the problem is not so much that we are just facing a 25% tariff. It's the vehicles are a big source of our exports to the United States. On top of that, the US has been negotiating deals in which Korea, EU, UK, Japan, etc. are only facing a 10 to 15% tariff for their vehicle exports to the United States. So not only are we facing high tariffs, we're facing high tariffs relative to some of our key competitors. And these really amplify the losses that we are going to face. And so I think the vehicles is a critical issue. The citrus is another big issue. We don't compete with the US producers. We don't compete with the Northern Hemisphere producers, but we do compete with Peru and we do compete with Chile. And they only face a 10% barrier. We're facing a 30% barrier. So we face real severe constraints from that front. And so I think these are some of the key products. And I should point out, though, that we export about 1,500 products to the US. Most of those are very small. And although they don't account for a large volume of exports, actually the biggest knock is going to occur for many of these smaller exporters and these firms exporting the US. And so we should not focus just on the big exporters. I think this is a very widespread effect that's going to affect many firms within South Africa that are trading with the United States. And so we need a much broader pool of consideration in terms of firms to think about and engage with, trying to formulate a deal. I'd like to close off just on the deal story. We have many firms, US firms in South Africa here, that generate jobs in the United States. And I think we can work very closely, much more closely, with trying to work with these US firms as instruments, as lobbying within the United States. We really need to raise how their interests are closely associated with open trade between the US and South Africa. And these are US firms. So good trade will benefit the US indirectly through their participation in the South African market. So pushing that front, I think, is another angle that we can include in some of these deals.
As you mentioned, South Africa's agricultural exports are not in direct competition with the output on the US market. Our seasons differ substantially, so we don't produce the same commodities at the same time. Do you think this has been fully considered in the calculation of this 30% tariff? And if not, what would form the argument that it shouldn't have been considered?
Well, I think they haven't featured strongly in the calculation of the 30% tariff. The initial calculation was a very rough, crude rule of thumb measure of how to measure a trade barrier that would try and eliminate the trade deficit between the US and South Africa. Although citrus and food and agriculture is a key aspect around that, but another aspect linked to that is the fact that actually many of those exports are gold exports, and many of which we don't face a tariff on. The calculation of gold trade is problematic. The trade deficit calculation didn't count services, where we are a big importer of US services, a net importer of US services, and which is positively benefiting US services industry. And that didn't feature into the calculation of this tariff. So this tariff calculation is a crude rule of thumb based, I think, to a large extent incorrect data, and it wasn't precise enough. Linking to the citrus, etc., that wasn't a feature within the discussions. I don't think there was no look analysis at the products at all in the calculation of these. Now, for us, the key problem relating to agriculture, as you're pointing out, is this is not competitive exports to the US. We don't compete with US firms at all. It's complement. It's good for the US health to import our citrus and our fruit and our vegetables, etc. Our concern is we compete with other Southern Hemisphere countries, and those countries are facing a much lower tariff than us. Chile and Argentina, Chile and Peru only face a 10% tariff, which is really going to place our exporters of agricultural products at a severe disadvantage with these other Southern Hemisphere countries that are exporting under the same season as us. So this is our big concern, and this is why trying to find a deal, negotiate an agreement where we lower our 30% tariff is really important. It's because we need to reduce our unfavorable circumstances relative to some of our key competitors in the United States, exporting to the United States market.
What type of support should South Africa's government offer to companies who export to the US impacted by the 30% tariff so as to prevent job losses and build production? There's the Export Support Desk that has been established according to a South African government media statement. We're not sure how that would work. Would that help?
Well, as you point out, it's not quite clear what it accounts for, what it constitutes. And what it will do. It seems, reading between the lines, that one of the key ideas is that it would provide information around the tariffs and the effects of the tariffs and how to deal and so on. And that's important. More information for small firms particularly is really important. The big firms know exactly what's going on. Smaller firms need more input. Secondly, it seems to focus on trying to assist domestic firms finding alternative markets. And that's a role that the state can play in providing more information. Once again, the big firms are adept at finding their own markets and own alternatives. But some of the smaller firms may need information around what alternative market opportunities do exist. Now, I think thirdly, what will probably link into this is some form of financial support or opportunities to access existing financial support systems within, for example, the DTIC, or new ones that they may be considering implementing as well. And that will be, I think, a third element of this portal of providing information to assist firms to adjust. But at the moment, there's no real money on the table to deal with this. They may be considering putting money on the table to help firms adjust, for example, find trade marketing assistance, trade finance assistance, etc., in order to support firms finding new market opportunities. For labor, the challenge is what to do with the labor as well, because workers are going to lose their jobs, and they will fall out. There's currently no clear system to provide additional support to enable those workers to receive additional income or financial support or training support, etc. And so this, I believe, is some of the discussions that are emerging with the Department of Labor of what complementary support systems can be put in place for workers that have lost their job. This may take the form of some form of financial assistance, but again, the details are not out there yet.
Also, as we know, Donald Trump's new tariff regime does not only affect South Africa, but the entire globe. So what do you see the change in global trade landscape looking like?
Well, he's completely disrupted the global trading landscape. He's effectively, global trade over the last 20 years has really been driven by the emergence of what they call global value chains. These are integrated production processes that cover different countries. So the production process is split to become global, not only local. He's breaking those global linkages. It's now going to become very difficult for countries, for example, to import components from China, use those components to produce a new good, and then export that good to the US. Because if the US perceives this as some transshipment of goods from China via your own country, they will add an additional 40% tariff or so onto your product. And so that's going to break down some of these value chains. Secondly, the US is really pushing for reorientating production back into the US economy. So they want companies to relocate out of foreign countries back into the US. And that, again, is going to break some of these trade relations. So it's a very disruptive process. I think in the long term, my view is that the US will become increasingly isolated. The rest of the globe is going to move ahead. It'll continue to globalize, hopefully, but the US will find themselves much more insular and isolated from that global trading order. So a short-term gain that the US is trying to push now, I think, will end up as a long-term loss for the US in terms of its global trade relations.
Professor, we'll leave it there for today. Again, thanking you for your insights, very valuable, and for your time.
Oh, pleasure. It was good to chat.
Great. Professor Lawrence Edwards is professor in the School of Economics and a research associate at the University of Cape Town, that's here in South Africa, talking US-SA trade relations, the 30% tariff hike or tariff imposed on the country, and what that means in terms of where South Africa should be looking to now, and what other more negotiations can be implemented. That story, I think, will continue as we continue the coverage of that very important topic. Also to come on the show later on, we have something that we're launching on Tuesdays, where we are dedicating a section of the show to gender-based violence, and this initiative by the South African Broadcasting Corporation, or the SABC. We'll find out more about that. That's a little later after our economics news. Right now, we get to our news headlines. Here's Jalani Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission has dismissed reports suggesting that it recently engaged South Africa's public protector regarding its citizens being denied access to health care services in the country. Palestinian protesters in South Africa are being hauled to court to prevent them from protesting outside Cape Union Mart Studios. The protesters claim Jewish business leader Philip Kravitz is a supporter of Israel. And finally, Brazil's Supreme Court has placed former President Jair Bolsonaro under house arrest. I will have details on these and other stories at 9 o'clock.
SABC News Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, let's find out what's happening in the world of sport. Here's Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And in this hour, let's start off with Olympic news. Discuss and short put sport specialist Andries Kruger feels honored after receiving the 2025 Coach of the Year G-Sport nomination. This after an illustrious career in coaching, having led his daughter Simone to become an Olympic gold medalist. Kruger adds that it feels good to be recognized by a global woman in sports platform, having collected global accolades while coaching top female para-athletes.
I'm very excited to be nominated as a G-Sport coach, and it means a lot when you get recognized, especially as a coach, because a coach can keep on giving of himself and never get recognized, but it stays an amazing but still very challenging job.
Kruger unpacks his journey as a professional coach, stating that it has been a pleasant experience having to train both his daughters, Lisanne and Simone, and further shares highlights with 20-year-old Simone, who later became a household name as a discus thrower.
With both of my kids, but Simone started training together with her older sister because she was so inspired of what her sister did. And that is where the journey started. In terms of the highlights, although Simone is only 20 years old, the biggest highlights go back to 2019, where we realized at the age of 14, the highlights in terms of a silver medal at Women's World in Dubai would become an enormous medal.
On to football news. Algeria made a commanding start to the Total Energies CAF African Nations Championship CHAN Pamoja 2024 campaign with a clinical 3-0 victory over co-host Uganda at a packed Nelson Mandela National Stadium in Kampala on Monday evening. Goals from Ayub Gezela, Abderrahmane Meziane and Sofiane Bayazid sealed the win for the North African Giants, who once again displayed their tournament pedigree with an organized, composed and tactically efficient performance that left the Cranes chasing shadows. The result marks Algeria's third consecutive win over Uganda at CHAN, extending their unbeaten group stage record in the competition to 7 matches. For Uganda, it was a sobering return to familiar struggles as their hunt for a first ever knockout appearance at CHAN continues. Uganda will hope to bounce back in their second Group C match against South Africa, while Algeria face Niger next and could seal early qualification with another victory. On to rugby news. Ireland star Dan Sheehan has been cited for his clear out on Tom Lina in the third test between Australia and the British and the Irish Lions at the weekend. The incident was missed by the matchday officials during the game, with Wallabies playmaker Lina forced off the pitch and did not return after failing his HIA. However, he was cited by the Independent Citing Commissioner Adrian Menez for an act of foul play contrary to Law 9.20, which reads dangerous play in a ruck or maul. And finally, with tennis news, Novak Djokovic withdrew from this week's start of the ATP Cincinnati Masters with a pull-out coming a year to the day from his Paris Olympic gold medal victory. Tournament officials confirmed, meaning the 38-year-old Serb will have played no matches between his Wimbledon semi-final loss to Jannik Sinner and the US Open start in 3 weeks. Djokovic, winner of 24 Grand Slam singles titles, first placed Cincinnati in 2005 and won the last of his 3 titles there in 2023 after losing 5 previous finals. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Ngwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
She builds, she leads, she rises. This August, join Channel Africa in celebrating the women who shape our communities, shift narratives, and carve out a future on their own terms.
These women together ought to be able to turn it right again.
From Cape Town to Kigali, Lagos to Lusaka, African women are rewriting the script. Here's to courage, creativity, and unstoppable progress. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Let's now find out what's happening in the world of business as we get the latest in that sector. Here is Tabiso Lehoku.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. African countries have been urged to continue to engage with the US to try to find a solution to the new set of tariffs. These range from 10 to 30%, with the 4 countries, Libya, South Africa, Algeria and Tunisia, facing some of the highest tariffs imposed by the Trump administration. Experts believe that the tariffs will have ripple effects on products that are only aimed at U.S. markets. Some countries like Zimbabwe have offered to unilaterally eliminate tariffs on U.S. imports, while others like Uganda have resolved to build more resilient and self-sustaining domestic economies. Ditaba Tsotitsi reports.
Lamola says Africa should also consider the African Continental Free Trade Area for intra-African trade and economic integration.
South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, has lambasted some members of the Government of National Unity and opposition parties for what he says is trying to score cheap political points amid the looming 30% US tariffs. The tariffs threaten thousands of jobs in industries like agriculture and car manufacturing. Lamola was addressing a joint media briefing in Pretoria with the Department of Trade and Industry. He says government is working on ways to mitigate job losses.
Our view is that all of us as South Africans, irrespective of our political affiliations, whether you're in opposition, NGO, business, or in government, GNU, partner, or anything, once you get out of South Africa, we all have a responsibility to promote the national interest of South Africa.
The ANC party has encouraged exporters to diversify their markets, while government is working to normalize relations with the US as the 30% tariffs loom. For South African goods, the tariffs are expected to take effect on Thursday if a new trade deal isn't reached. This came at the end of the 4-day ANC-NEC meeting in Germiston, east of Johannesburg. In his closing remarks, ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa said they will continue to engage with the Trump administration. He also encouraged local exporters to take advantage of the African Free Continental Area and diversify their export markets.
While we must act with urgency and purpose to limit the impact of these very punitive tariffs, we must also undertake measures to ensure the resilience of our economy and exports into the future.
Farmers have warned that a persistent cold spell across most of Côte d'Ivoire's cocoa-growing regions could jeopardize the development of the next October to March main crop. They say plantations need more sunshine and rain. The world's largest cocoa producer is in the middle of the rainy season, which runs officially from April to mid-November. The US dollar wavered as the rising odds of Federal Reserve rate cuts weighed on sentiment, while investors assessed the broader economic impact of US tariffs unleashed last week. The dollar remained under pressure following Friday's US jobs report that showed cracks in the labor market, prompting traders to swiftly price in rate cuts next month. The US currency found its footing on Monday, but was weaker in early trading this morning. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,521 naira. In Botswana, it's at 13.38. Kenya, 128 shilling 188. And Zambia, 22 kwacha 69. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar will cost you 5 ruble 53. Russia, 79 rubles 87. India, 79 rupees 69. China, 71 18. And in South Africa, the dollar will cost you 17 rand 98 cents. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Commodities, gold $3,373 and platinum $1,325 for dollars per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $68.61 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Tabisolo Hoko.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
SABC Sports brings you Chasing the Sun, that's the South African Broadcasting Corporation, a powerful 5-part documentary series about the South Africa's national rugby team, the Springboks, telling the rousing tale of their path to redemption and ultimate World Cup glory in 2019. It started on the 13th of July at 7:30 p.m. on SABC2, and you can tune in every Sunday for the highs, the heartache, and the heroes that made rugby history. Stream each chapter on SABC Plus, anytime, anywhere, no subscription needed. Don't miss Chasing the Sun this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC2. Be there when history shines.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Gender-based violence, or GBV, remains one of the most urgent and devastating social issues facing South Africa, with police statistics and human rights reports consistently highlighting alarming levels of abuse, particularly against women and children. Now, in response, the South African Broadcasting Corporation, the SABC, has launched a bold new campaign across its radio platforms aimed at amplifying the fight against GBV. And as part of this initiative, Tuesdays will now feature dedicated programming focused on raising awareness, giving survivors a voice, and holding institutions accountable. And to tell us a little bit more about this campaign and the role that public broadcasting can play in shifting the national conversation, we're now joined by Nada Wochelo, who's the SABC's Group Executive for Radio. Asanda, thanks so much for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Peter. Good morning to your listeners. Thank you so much for having me.
So tell us about this campaign. What prompted this new initiative by SABC Radio?
Peter, I am sure every South African is concerned about what is happening in our country. The government has declared this a national crisis, and indeed it is, because every time you watch television, every time you listen to the news on the radio, there is, a woman who is killed or a child who is sexually violated and so on. And this is something that we cannot just sit and do nothing about or leave it to the authorities to handle. As the nation, we have to use every channel, every resource that is at our disposal to fight gender-based violence and see that it is totally eradicated in our country. So as a public broadcaster, we thought we've got the most powerful tool that we can use, which is our radio platforms, our airwaves, and even our television platforms and digital platforms, to spread the message that this is not okay. This cannot be accepted.
So what are some of the core messages that you want the public broadcaster to be sharing?
There's various messages, Peter, and we have given stations the freedom, to interact with their audiences and the stakeholders, to learn what are the areas in their communities that are really sore points. For example, in many areas, there are certain stereotypes, there are certain beliefs that the stations are going to be tackling. The issue of patriarchy in African society is quite a huge challenge. So some of the stations, are dealing with changing the mindsets of males in communities, where we see those quite prevalent, where young boys are raised to believe that women are an inferior gender and they can be objectified and so on. There's a number of messages and different campaigns that we will be focusing on within this umbrella of the fight against gender-based violence. We would like members of the society, to participate in the discussions and really open the conversations, about what is happening in their areas, and get assistance from experts on how to deal with those various challenges. So we're looking at gender-based violence in children, in women, members of the LGBTQI plus communities as well, who find themselves, being victimized in many instances. We have to look at all angles that can assist communities, come out stronger from this.
SABC reaches millions of people, including rural and many marginalized communities. So this is a large audience. Have we seen in the past if the public broadcaster can and has contributed to changing mindsets? Because as you say, this is something that's really, really important for society to change the way they think about GBV.
Yes, Peter. We've got various examples where we have seen the public broadcaster really playing a role in changing the mindsets of, ordinary South Africans. I always make an example of the time when AIDS was new in our society, and stereotyping people who were living with AIDS was, quite common. But through initiatives like Soul City, for example, I'm sure you remember the TV drama Soul City. It started as a TV drama, and then radio also created a radio version in all the 11 official languages. So all of our platforms had a Soul City feature, whether they were doing the drama, which were followed by, discussions with experts, and some stations that don't do drama would have those conversations with audiences with the help of experts, that speak the language of the particular station. And if you look at how AIDS, has been accepted, and how freely people talk about it, and how help, is freely available, I attribute that, a large part of it to the work of the public broadcaster, because of exactly what you've just said, the wide reach, reaching listeners of all socio-economic, status, and whether they're rural or urban, wherever they are in South Africa. We've got a radio station that speaks their language, that can break down whatever issues that are troubling in that area, and ensure that we bring on board experts, because this is not just SABC saying, let's talk about this, but we bring various stakeholders. We bring the police, we bring the Tutuzela centers, which is a great initiative by the NPA. We bring, your Sonke Gender Justice, the NGOs that work in this space. They come on board and they assist us. Even the GBV fund that was set up by the president as a response, to this crisis, we're having conversations with them. They will be talking to us about the various initiatives that they are doing around the country to help communities.
I was just about to ask you about working with different stakeholders, because I guess this is one of those issues that you have to work with partners to get the results that are desired.
Yes, definitely, Peter. We can never do this alone. What we're bringing to the table as the SABC is our platforms, is our reach. We're lending our voice to this scourge, but the people that are working in the communities, people that have done research, that have information about, what is it that they are seeing that they think we can tackle in our conversations. We're working with all those people, because really, this is not something that the SABC can do alone.
Is there a plan to expand this to other platforms like TV, digital, community outreach?
Definitely, Peter. As we are signing agreements with our various stakeholders, there will be community outreach. For example, we have the Department of Social Development in the Eastern Cape saying we would like to work with Umhlobo Wenene, and we would like to go into the rural communities and go on the ground, and do outside broadcasts, bring the services that are normally outside the reach of the people in those areas. So we will see, on the ground activations, community outreach. We will have coverage from our various platforms, news, television. We're using our digital platforms as we speak to amplify the campaign. So yes, definitely, we would like to see the campaign living on various platforms of the SAPC.
I suppose also care needs to be taken in terms of how one tells this story, to be sensitive on the one hand, but at the same time, hard-hitting and informative.
Yes, definitely, especially when you're talking to children or about children. Care needs to be taken, and that's why we have various organizations also offering workshops, and training for our content producers and journalists, to say this is how you can, report on a story that involves a child, or even in schools. I mean, because we see gender-based violence in schools as well. So there is a particular way that you can cover what is happening in schools, which affects children or which is about children. So there is a lot of care that needs to be taken around this, and even individuals, how things are reported. We do also come across reporting in the social media, for example, about individuals mentioning names of people that are alleged to have perpetrated certain acts. So there is care that needs to be taken. We don't want to face, legal challenges while trying to do good work, to assist the communities. So there has been organizations that have stepped forward to offer training and workshops on how we can deal with certain subjects.
So an important campaign, particularly in this month. I wonder, at the end of this campaign, for you to feel like we've done something, what would you like to have seen?
Obviously, Peter, we would like to see the statistics, declining, but we would like to see communities, South Africans, being much more aware of what is going on around them, taking, extra care for children that are in their community. When we grew up, Peter, the duty of taking care of children in the community was not just the parents. Our parents would be free and happy to leave us in the care of neighbors when they're going to work or going to funerals and so on. And there were less of these incidents happening, when we grew up. We want to see people taking care of children as communities, because parents sometimes, are not able to take care of their children because of circumstances, but they have to be able to rely on the broader community, in taking care of their children. We would like to see more awareness. We would like to see the spaces, where women and girls move around safer. We have to contribute to creating safer communities and safer spaces, for our women and girls to be able to move around, go to work, go to school without fear of being harmed. So the awareness and changing mindsets. We would like to see our men, changing the way that they view women and girls and behave around women and girls, and children. And like I said, members of LGBTQI plus communities that are also vulnerable to acts of gender-based violence.
Asanda, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much indeed for joining us on the program and this wonderful initiative. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Peter, for affording me the opportunity to talk about this campaign. It is indeed a very important one for all South Africans to participate in. We would like to see the end of gender-based violence in our country.
That was Nada Wachela, who's the SABC's Group Executive for Radio, talking to us about this gender-based violence campaign that our radio platforms are engaged in. Okay, just before we talk to Palesa about what's coming up a little bit later on, some of you may or may not know, but today's a really important day in South African history. On this day, 1962, Nelson Mandela, he went underground and after the ANC was banned in 1960, but he was on the run for about 17 months. And today, August the 5th, 1962, he was arrested at Howick, just outside Durban. And that really marked the beginning of his 27 years incarceration. So it was a major turning point in his life, but also the country, because in many ways he became a symbol of the liberation to democracy for South Africa. So significant day in South African history, and also Burkina Faso, Happy Independence Day today. Palace is in studio, and she's going to tell us why we should be excited about On the Move a little bit later on.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I don't know, but when we were younger, we'd see friendships as extensions of ourselves, right? And we'd had to pick one friend that's going to be our best friend, and it's besties for life. But also we've sort of created this culture where your friends have to be like your ride or die. You have to speak to them so often. But I think that is changing, and we're looking at something that's called soft friendships, where people are now okay with the fact that friendship and loyalty can be soft. We don't have to speak all the time. We can be there for one another without being overwhelming in each other's spaces, with each other's time, but also still understand the value of friendship. So we're going to go into that, whether these soft friendships are replacing the besties for life energy, and how do we actually also maintain a soft friendship, because there's a difference between a soft friendship and a friendship that's actually dying.
A love bombing friendship as well.
Right,
the toxic ones where you don't want you to have any other friends except them.
You have to let go of those ones, and I think it happens a lot in women more than men, because men I think are more fluid with their friendships. We just want to hold on for dear life.
When we fall out, we fight, and then we make up straight away.
In today's In the Cubicle as well, we're speaking about the workplace. We're speaking about a trend that is evident in many African places of employment, where unhappy employees are taking steps to improve their own job satisfaction. I wonder how, because they might still be unhappy with the job itself or the environment itself, but they're taking their own steps to make themselves happier in that environment.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by that, and I tell young people when I advise them is always look at the job as how are you developing yourself. Don't look at it as if you have to please 101 people.
Right.
Always look at it as a part of your own journey. But
that's On the Move coming up after Rise and Shine.
And that's how we come to the end of today's episode of Rise and Shine. I'm Peter Ndoro.
I'm Asanda Beda. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll do this again tomorrow, 6 till 9. Stay tuned for On the Move with Benjamin Mushatama and Palesa Tao. That's after the news, which is now with Jolani Tulo Umwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Top stories: Asawa, Rwanda formally agrees to accept U.S. deported migrants, and Brazil's former president placed under house arrest. Good morning. Rwanda has confirmed that it has agreed to accept up to 250 migrants deported from the U.S. This comes as President Donald Trump's administration takes a hardline approach toward immigration. The agreement was reportedly signed by U.S. and Rwandan officials in Kigali in June. Washington has already sent an initial list of 10 people to be vetted. Trump aims to deport millions of immigrants in the U.S. illegally, and his administration has sought to ramp up removals to third countries, including sending convicted criminals to South Sudan and Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland. Rwanda has in recent years positioned itself as a destination country for migrants that Western countries would like to remove, despite concerns by rights groups that Kigali does not respect basic rights. The Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission has dismissed reports suggesting that it recently engaged South Africa's public protector regarding its citizens being denied access